legislators and by our elected officials in Washington, D.C. It is a totally unfair system. I feel badly for anybody under federal indictment.
Tommy got 9 months. Of all 55 defendants, he was the only defendant with no priors to receive actual prison time.
What we did was identify every distributor over the internet who supplied these products, and we charged every single one of them without exception.
But is it true that the 54 others got less than Tommy got, that Tommy got the most severe sentence of the 55?
Of the 55, most defendants did receive a far less sentence. However, there was someone who was prosecuted just 2 years ago who received a sentence of 2 years. So that's substantially more than the sentence that Tommy
Right, but your answer is that in Operation Pipe Dream, he received the most severe sentence.
So far, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they want to be in there. And that's okay. It's okay. It's a nice new prison in near Bakersfield. Minimum security. Totally minimum. No, it's a federal. It's very nice. Sean, Forrest on the phone.
Yeah, he got a phone call this morning. Mr. John, like I'm a real big fan of yours, but you have to go to jail October the 8th, 2 o'clock at a place called Taft. It's somewhere in California. I don't know where that is, but it's somewhere in California.
A big deal was made out of a couple of interviews that Tommy gave after the guilty plea. Tommy made some remarks which the judge and the prosecution interpreted as undercutting his plea and his statements regarding his remorse.
I'm really not allowed to say anything.
You think this is blown out of proportion?
Just the charges speak for themselves. Really.
The government then pointed to an online chat session sponsored by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, where Tommy was asked, "What do you feel about the feds cracking down on glass pipes and bongs?" And he replied, "I feel pretty sad, but it seems to be the only weapons of mass destruction they found this year." They argued that Tommy became wealthy by glamorizing the illegal distribution and use of marijuana, and they cited his film Up in Smoke, which they said trivialized law enforcement efforts to combat marijuana trafficking and use. Totally discounting the satirical nature of the film and taking the position that this was somehow or other a serious slap at law enforcement.
Okay, just be cool.
How long you guys been in Mexico?
A week. I mean, a day.
Which one is it, a week or a day?
It's a weekday.
You got any narcotics or marijuana in here?
Not anymore.
What?
Even in the transcripts, they said, that I'm in here because I did these movies. Like it says, children are going to be watching these for decades.
I think this whole portion of the government's sentencing memorandum undercuts their statements to us that they were not seeking jail time for Tommy. They'll say to the judge, here's a man who has become wealthy thumbing his nose at marijuana enforcement efforts. The government could only have hoped in pointing that out to inflame the judge and send a message to the judge that here's a man who needs to be taught a lesson and should be incarcerated. That's my personal take on it.
The government has admitted that part of the reason for the sentence was the exercise of his First Amendment rights, that is, making humorous films about drug use, which they claim encouraged people to use drugs, is a plain violation of the spirit of the First Amendment. So you have an equal protection violation, a First Amendment violation, and a needless misuse of criminal resources when easily this could have been done in a civil manner.
The idea that anyone would have to serve an extra day in prison because of a comedy routine involving Sergeant Studenko, that's like the worst paranoid Cheech and Chong fantasy from the early 70s come true.
Hey, man, look, the house is being raided, man. Get out of the house.
Sounds very Latin. Could be the Mexican connection. Better get this down.
This is America.
You get to criticize the government in this country. You get to say, I think these guys are ridiculous. It's guaranteed in the very First Amendment to the Constitution. It's what this country was founded on. You get to do that by being an American.
And the fact that she brought up your movies?
The fact that she brought up our movies means we don't want you to say whatever you want to say. This is not your America anymore, it's our America. You know, and that's absolutely not the case.
I think the joke we did in the Tonight Show, I said, you know, if Tommy had been a conservative radio talk show host instead of being in movies, he'd be in rehab. See, I think if they want to get you, they get you.
One of the most emotional moments along the way for Tommy was when he realized the fight was over. He was going to prison and there was nothing he could do about it.
It was sobering, you know, it was a sobering moment because all the bullshit was over, you know. There was no more pretending. There was no more, well, we can win this on appeal, or they can't do this to us, or, you know, how could they? I'm just an actor. It was all of that was over. No, I was going to jail. I want to make a difference now. That's why life has been so perfect up till now. You know, really perfect. Can you imagine? I've made a living for years, 30 years, talking about a culture, and now I'm finally going to have to stand up and be counted for. It's just only right.
I think when you look at the willingness to punish marijuana offenders this severely, take away their jobs, their cars, their houses, put them in prison for up to life without parole, it's not because of a small number of CIA people conspiring. It's because of something very deep in our culture that's willing to punish and destroy the people we don't like and who don't fit and who don't behave the way that we do.
I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and my dad full Chinese, Cantonese, and my mom was Scotch-Irish. And they met in a park in Edmonton, and it was pretty hairy in those days. I grew up knowing I was mixed, you know, and there was no doubt about it. And I was definitely not invited into the white race. I remember a 10-year-old, 11-year-old girl having a birthday party on my block, and everybody got invited except me because I was half Chinese. You know. The father did not want to mix, you know, have that little half-breed boy there, you know. And these were the people I played with every day, you know, that kind of thing. So growing up in that environment, you know, with all the rednecks and that, we learned to fight. First thing we did, you know, my brother and I, actually my brother, he was much better. He was older than me, so he had to clear the jungle, you know. I always felt second class with white girls, you know, especially the high-class white girls, because they'd always be sneaking around to see me, or lying, you know, telling I was Italian or something. And then when I started dating black girls, I was like, wow, this was great, you know. I really became a black guy, man. I did. Music, everything. I dressed, talked, tried to talk, but, you know, I wasn't very good at it. When I was with Motown, I played guitar in a band called Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers. And I wrote a song called Does Your Mama Know About Me? About a guy asking a woman if her mother knows that he's black, or in my case, Chinese.
Even though Tommy created the Vancouvers, he was fired from his own band. But around the same time, a bass player named Ray Vaughan handed Tommy two things that would change his life forever: a Lenny Bruce comedy album and a marijuana cigarette. Lenny Bruce exposed the hypocrisy around marijuana and the laws against it, which had been steeped in racism and used as a tool to keep minorities down. It was the jazz musicians who turned it into a sacrament and passed its cultural use down to the beats and the hippies.